The morning sun had barely risen over the quiet coastal Navy base, casting a soft orange glow across the water and the rows of gray buildings that stood like silent guardians along the shoreline. It was the kind of morning that usually passed without incident. Sailors moved through their routines, trucks rolled through security checkpoints, officers carried coffee cups and paperwork across the courtyard. Everything looked calm, controlled, and predictable. But that calm would soon be shattered in a way none of them expected. At the outer security gate, two guards were checking identification cards as a small line of vehicles waited patiently. Beyond the gate, inside the base, a group of Navy SEAL trainees were finishing their morning run. Among them was a rookie operator named Daniel Hayes. He had only recently been assigned to the base after months of brutal training. He wasn't the biggest man in the group, nor the loudest. In fact, most people barely noticed him. But those who had trained with him knew something important about Daniel. He stayed calm when everyone else panicked, and when things got difficult, he got sharper. While the trainees caught their breath and stretched near the barracks, a black pickup truck suddenly roared down the access road toward the gate. The engine growled loudly, echoing across the quiet base entrance. The guards looked up immediately. The truck didn't slow down. One guard raised his hand, signaling for the driver to stop. The other reached for his radio. But before either could say a word, the truck slammed on its brakes just a few feet from the checkpoint barrier. The doors burst open. Out stepped a massive man. He had to weigh at least 300 pounds. His shoulders were enormous, his arms thick like tree trunks, and his face carried the hard, angry look of someone who had come looking for trouble. He slammed the truck door behind him so hard it echoed across the gate. The guards exchanged a quick glance. "Sir," one of them said calmly, "this is a restricted military base. I'm going to need you to step back and identify yourself." The giant didn't respond. Instead, he walked forward slowly, his heavy boots crunching against the gravel. His eyes moved across the checkpoint, scanning the guards, the barrier, the buildings beyond it. Then he laughed. Not a friendly laugh, a mocking one. "So this is the famous Navy base," he said loudly. "Thought you guys were supposed to be tough." The guards stayed calm. They had dealt with angry civilians before. "Sir, you need to leave immediately. If you don't comply, we'll be forced to detain you." The giant stepped closer. Up close, he looked even bigger. His chest was like a wall, his neck thick and tense with muscle. But there was something else too, something wild in his expression. "I came here to see the so-called best fighters in the world, Navy SEALs, right?" He smirked. "Well, where are they?" Inside the base, a small group had already begun noticing the commotion at the gate. A few sailors slowed down. Someone pointed toward the entrance. And not far away, Daniel Hayes looked up from tying his boot. "What's going on?" one trainee asked. Daniel squinted toward the gate. Even from a distance, he could see the massive figure standing there. "Trouble," Daniel said quietly. Back at the gate, the guards had already called for backup. "Sir, this is your final warning," one of them said firmly. The giant rolled his shoulders and stepped even closer. "You gonna stop me?" Before either guard could respond, the man suddenly shoved the checkpoint barrier aside with shocking force. The metal arm snapped upward with a loud crack. Gasps erupted from nearby sailors. The guards instantly reached for their weapons, but the giant raised his hands mockingly. "Relax, I'm just walking in." And he did. He simply walked past the gate and onto the base like he owned the place. Within seconds, alarms began sounding across the entrance. Radios crackled with urgent voices. Inside the compound, officers stepped outside their buildings to see what was happening. The giant continued walking forward, slow and confident, like he expected someone to challenge him. And soon enough, someone did. A group of SEAL trainees approached from across the courtyard. They had heard the alarms and moved toward the gate to investigate. Leading them was a tall operator with years of experience. He stepped forward and raised his hand. "That's far enough," he said. The giant stopped. His eyes moved across the group. Then he smiled again. "So these are the famous SEALs," he said loudly. "You guys look smaller than I expected." Some of the trainees shifted slightly, annoyed by the insult. But the experienced operator stayed calm. "You're trespassing on a military installation. Turn around and leave, now." The giant cracked his knuckles. "How about this? One of you fights me." The courtyard went quiet. Even the sailors watching from a distance froze. The operator frowned. "This isn't a game." But the giant stepped forward again. "I heard stories about how tough Navy SEALs are." He pointed toward the trainees. "Prove it." For a moment, nobody moved. Then something unexpected happened. From the back of the group, Daniel Hayes stepped forward. A few of the trainees turned toward him in surprise. Daniel wasn't the biggest, he wasn't the most intimidating, but his face was calm. "Let me handle it," he said quietly. The experienced operator looked at him. "You sure?" he asked. Daniel nodded. The giant noticed him walking forward and laughed loudly. "Ha ha ha! That's your fighter?" he said. "Kid looks like he weighs half what I do." Daniel stopped about 10 feet away. He studied the giant carefully. The man's size was intimidating, 300 pounds of muscle and aggression. But Daniel didn't look nervous. In fact, he looked relaxed. "Last chance," the operator behind him said to the giant. "Leave." The giant ignored him. Instead, he focused on Daniel. "You ready to get hurt, rookie?" he asked. Daniel didn't answer. He simply adjusted his stance slightly. The giant charged. For a man his size, he moved surprisingly fast. His massive arms swung forward, aiming a crushing punch toward Daniel's head. Gasps erupted from the watching sailors. But Daniel moved even faster. He stepped sideways at the last second, letting the giant's momentum carry forward. The punch missed completely. Before the giant could react, Daniel struck. One precise movement, a sharp blow to the side of the giant's neck. The giant staggered. Confusion flashed across his face. He turned again, roaring with anger, and swung another massive punch. Daniel ducked under it. Another quick movement. This time, Daniel struck behind the knee. The giant's balance collapsed instantly. His massive body stumbled forward, and before anyone could even process what was happening, Daniel stepped behind him and delivered one final precise strike to a pressure point near the base of the skull. The effect was immediate. The 300-pound giant froze. Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed face first onto the pavement with a thunderous crash. Silence. Complete silence. Dozens of sailors stared in disbelief. The entire fight had lasted less than 10 seconds. Daniel stepped back calmly, breathing normally. The giant lay unconscious on the ground. One of the experienced SEALs walked forward and checked the man's pulse. "Out cold," he said. The operator exploded with murmurs. "Did you see that? What just happened?" The operator who had spoken earlier looked at Daniel with a small smile. "Rookie," he said. "Where'd you learn that?" Daniel shrugged slightly. "Training," he said. Within minutes, military police arrived and secured the unconscious trespasser. As they loaded the massive man onto a stretcher, the guards at the gate shook their heads in amazement. 300 pounds, one of them muttered, and the rookie dropped him like a sack of bricks. The experienced SEAL watched Daniel walk back toward the barracks like nothing had happened. He chuckled quietly. "Remind me," he said to another operator beside him, "never underestimate the quiet ones. Because sometimes the most dangerous fighter in the room isn't the biggest. It's the one who stays calm when everyone else loses control." And on that quiet morning at the Navy base, a 300-pound giant had just learned that lesson the hard way.